Hello, I'm George Miller from citizensjournal.us, and this is Good Morning Oxnard, done with KADY TV. Well, some of you have been following the severe Oxnard budget crisis over the last few months. It's actually been going on for years. We've just known about it for the last several months. We've heard all kinds of experts pontificate about how we got into the mess that we're in. The city has hired millions of dollars worth of consultants. First they told us there was a $2 million deficit, then it was an $8 million deficit. Now last week we were told it's $11.6 million and potentially $90 million over the next 10 years in endless deficits. So the city is now trying to address this and come to grips with it. I talked to quite a few people being involved in the city council meetings, and some people kind of stand out over others. And we've brought with us today Mr. Velasquez, a lifelong resident of Oxnard, a retired Teamster who got involved in civic affairs because he was upset about a prison in Oxnard and wanted it out of the area. And it kind of snowballed. He's now heavily involved in civic affairs. I first met him listening to him at the city council meetings, and he's been on Good Morning Oxnard before as well. And we brought him in today to give the informed citizens' perspective on what's going on with the budget and talk about some real-world problems and ideas. So I'd like Al to give us a little perspective right now about that.
Well, thank you, George, and thank Bob for inviting me. I mean, I wasn't expecting this, but thank you for having me here. I'll just share a little bit about myself. As you mentioned, I was born and raised in Oxnard 71 years ago. I come from a large family in Oxnard. I've been married for 50 years to my wife, Betty. We celebrating our 50th anniversary January of this year. I have two lovable great sons, Al and Michael. I have 3 grandsons. As I mentioned, I was born in Oxnard, 6th generation California. So my family's been here for a long, long time. I got involved with politics, not intentionally. I had no ambition of being involved with civic matters, but I just happened to, I got drawn into it because, as mentioned, there was a prison in Oxnard, and that's when I first got involved. And because that, progressively I have been appointed to various positions for the school district, from the city, homeless commission, and other committees. Going through all of that, I ran for city council in 2012, as mentioned, because I wasn't happy with the way the city was being run. So here I am today on the invitation of George. So hopefully we can touch on some issues and hopefully maybe try to solve some problems in the city.
Sounds good to me. Well, Al and I are both very objectives oriented, and we were talking earlier, we said, let's start out with what we're supposed to accomplish. Well, why does this city government exist? Well, the very first and most important purpose of the city is to provide public safety. Public safety could be the police, it could be the fire, and also the infrastructure that we need to live. Things like the water system, things as mundane as garbage pickup, processing and recycling material, processing wastewater. Those are the basic services that we have to have from the city. There also is an overlay of various social services and other programs too. So we have to prioritize what do we really want the city to do, and as Al points out, where is the money going to come from? How are we going to manage that and manage the personnel? Now, personnel is the largest single expense of the city. The salaries, the benefits, the personnel management are the bulk of the expenditures that the city has.
Now, let me kind of piggyback on what you said, George, and that is so true. It's no mystery now that over the last year or two, I had a printout of some of these salaries from department heads and upper management. This is just one of the big problems in the city. I mean, some of these salaries are, outrageous for a city of 200,000 people. The benefits, the lucrative benefits, the sick leave, accrued leave, vacation, overtime. See, overtime is a big issue and killer, a big drain in our budget. So this is just some of the problems that I feel when it comes to some of the issues. I call it bleeding. Where is the city bleeding? Now, as far as trying to resolve some of these issues, me personally, it's been mentioned before, You need to rein in some of these lucrative benefits, salaries. You need to bring them in line. And how do you do that? Well, there's a number of factors on doing that. Number one, well, we'll talk about pension reform in a second. I'll just use some of the contracts that the city has with the departments. I'll use the police department, for example. You need to, where we're at right now, fiscally, financially, the city has to sit down and start using that term freeze. You need to freeze salaries. You need to freeze benefits. The city cannot continue paying increases, salary increases, benefit increases. At some point, in order to get out of this rut, you're going to have to take charge and rein in some of these high salaries and benefits.
Were you there the night that they decided to increase all the salary ranges without having first done a salary survey like they said they had to do before?
I'm sorry to say I wasn't there at that meeting, and if I had, rest assure you, I would have voiced my opinion, probably in opposition to what was done that one night.
Yeah, so obviously salaries and compensation are the biggest single compensation problem we have right now, which is not unique to Oxnard, is the pension costs. Not only the pension costs, but the unfunded liabilities of the pension. The unfunded liability is money that should have been put or will need to be put to meet future pension obligations, which are huge. Now, public pensions greatly outpace private sector pensions, and people in the private sector are not happy about that because they say, well, we're paying these guys salary and they're making a lot more than we are. Some of you might know that the county attempted to control that last year, and a voter initiative was submitted to reform the pension system and move away from a defined benefit plan, and that was sabotaged in the court system. They weren't allowed to do that. We have similar problems, probably more severe in Oxnard than at the county level, that do have to be addressed because those are the single biggest things. In fact, 6.3 of the projected $10 to $11 million deficits for the next 10 years are pension-related costs. It's just a huge amount of money that has to be addressed, and that was being addressed by an additional tax fund, which is now depleted, which is one of the reasons for more than half of the deficit coming up.
Well, see, and I agree with you, George. And part of the reason is, I mean, we need some kind of pension reform. In years past, the city really depended on a lot of development. They used to live off the developer fees. Well, consequently, economically, over the last 5-6 years, the housing industry is in the slumps. So consequently, there is no development. So what's like in here, the city needs a source of revenue to continue to operating and paying the contribution for workers' comp, pension funds, and salaries. Well, they took a big hit when the economy took a dive. So consequently, now they're faced with this dilemma: where is the money coming from?
Well, the biggest source of money for the general fund is property taxes. And the state takes their cut and gives us what they want to us afterwards. I guess the second largest is probably sales taxes. And most of the other revenue comes from various types of fees that the city charges, plannings and permits and stuff like that.
Well, if you heard last night, I believe last night, Tuesday, at the council meeting, that the presentation that next year, the fiscal year 2015-2016, the city of Oxnard is going to get hit minus $2.5 million because there was an error from the tax board in regards to the Fillmore overpayment or underpayment. So consequently, they're going to have to recoup that money. So again, the city is in for another $2.5 million minus.
That's correct. That's correct.
So it just doesn't end.
We probably need to think less about how to divide up the pie than how to make the pie bigger. And the most positive people at city council meetings talk about things to grow the economy, how to bring in jobs, how to bring in industry. And the best type of industry you have in town is that generates sales taxes for us. And the next best is that which produces jobs, because people with incomes can afford that and they pay more tax money. Now, let me give you a contrast. I was talking with Dale Francisco, who's a city council member up in Oxnard. We were comparing notes at a meeting we were at a couple of months ago. And I told him what our budget was. I think it was $362 million last year. He says, you know, that's about the same size as the budget in wealthy Santa Barbara. The only difference is that Santa Barbara has half the population of Oxnard. So that's our basic problem, is that the income level in Oxnard is the second or third lowest in Ventura County, and we have all the same needs that the rich people in Santa Barbara have for roads and sewers and water and stuff like that.
Well, that's true, George. So how do you overcome that?
Well, a couple of ways. You know, one is to try to bring in people that make more money and businesses that make more money. Right?
Very good. Now, my question, respond to that would be, what is being done to do that? Now, I'll share this example with you. When, leaving the political parties out of this, when Meg Whitman was running for governor, she held a rally in Burbank. I attended that rally. And my purpose was, hopefully, I did get the opportunity, maybe sitting with her, but she's such a busy lady. I did want to sit with her and probably just in conversation, try to mention or try to have a discussion with her. What are the possibilities of bringing some of that silly called computer chip industry to the city of Oxnard? See, I never got that opportunity. This is something that the city of Oxnard, the leadership, should be doing, meeting with people like so. They have a great opportunity. We have the climate, we have the property, the air, the property, the projects, the development, and the commercial buildings. This is something that I feel that the city should be doing right now, putting together some kind of a task force, small task force, and meeting with people like Miss Whitman and trying to bring in good paying jobs into the city like so.
I totally agree with you, and you ought to get some business people on that blue ribbon council as well. Now the city actually is not exactly doing nothing about it. There's several things they are doing right now. First of all, they set up a public-private corporation 15 or 20 years ago called EDCO, which is charged with bringing industry into town. Secondly, they have a Convention and Tourism Bureau, which is supposed to be promoting tourism. And then thirdly, we have the Harbor Commission, which is supposed to be developing the harbor for not only the recreational benefit of the citizens, but also economic development as well. And on the third item, people seem to be very unhappy with what's going on right now with the vacant lobster trap, Casas Arena, and what's that other place? Fisherman's Wharf, right?
I'm glad you brought that up, George, because that's another topic in itself. First of all, you know, you have to ask yourself, does Mayor Flynn, in one of your interviews, made a comment that, simply put, that the city's paying out more in services than what we're receiving in revenue. Now, assuming that's true, and I believe him, assuming that's true, so you have to, why? What is the city doing to generate or generate revenue from that harbor, where in reality there's nothing they can do? Well, and they say that because the county has a final say-so what's being developed in that harbor. Now, having worked in construction for 30-some years, and I've been through 4 recessions over my lifetime, where we're at with this recession, I don't see any overnight improvement in the economy. So having said that, I don't see any development, in my opinion, at the harbor for the next 5 years or better, at least, maybe longer. So what I'm trying to say is, I don't see any increase in revenues from the harbor over the next 5 or 7 or 8 years. And if that's the case, why is the city continuing wanting to hang on to that property when we're bleeding to death? I used that term repeatedly before. When we're bleeding financially, why don't we just break away from it? There's provisions in the eminent domain amendments, constitutional amendments, amendment number 10 and number 5, that gives the city the right to obtain that property and condemn it and acquire that property through eminent domain. It's called the police power.
So you're speaking about Aaron Starr's recent proposal.
Well, I said that 4 or 5 months ago before even Starr brought that up. So, but nothing gets done. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. It seems like, without criticizing the city council, it seems like they're just frozen. But by that I mean, not criticizing, at times I wonder if they really don't know where to go with this. And I think that might be the problem.
I think they need citizens to help them, and that actually has had some results. So last night at the city council meeting, Mayor Flynn announced a major breakthrough in the harbor management agreement. And if you recall, we had a session at Good Morning Oxnard where we criticized the proposed settlement, which gave them a 10-year contract with the county and gave Oxnard absolutely no say in development. Well, that was resoundingly rejected after protests by citizens like us, and the council itself was against it, and they shot down the county and staff proposal to do that. Well, the latest deal right now is that instead of a 10-year agreement, it would only be a 3-year agreement with a 2-year option. It would have a renegotiation of the community services agreement for things like harbor patrolling, and within 1 year we would have to develop a new governance model which would be more stakeholder-centric. And Mayor Flynn is suggesting something similar to how the airport authorities work, where you have multiple stakeholders and the cities actually have more weight in the decision-making than the county does. So it would effectively change the axis of power to put more power in the hands of where the harbor is actually located, which is in Oxnard. And so I totally agree with Al and his concerns there. The second thing we have to look at is tourism. We have a tremendous amount of income coming through now because of hotel taxes and sales taxes. What is the hotel tax percentage? Do you know? It's something like $15 or $20 on every night spent in a hotel goes into hotel tax, much of which finds its way into city coffers. That's a major opportunity. And we have one hotel group that owns 7 hotels in Port Hueneme, Oxnard, and Ventura, including the Marriott Courtyard, which is a beautiful facility, and the Hampton Inn down in the harbor. And they also right now have an exclusive right to negotiate with Lynn Krieger, who's the harbor director, for the redevelopment of the Casa Serena and Lobster Trap properties. But I agree with Al, even if that started today, it would be 5 to 7 years before we'd actually see some income.
So this is where I use the term bleeding, financially bleeding. Now, let's bounce from the harbor to the golf course. That's been a constant drain for years. Where do we go with that?
With the harbor, which?
With the golf course. We're going,
oh, that's a good question.
Let's talk about the golf course. Let's touch on where the main financial drain is presently.
Well, for every dollar spent at the Performing Arts Center, we have $2 in deficit. We have a $1.2 million annual deficit in the golf course and a $3 million accumulated debt, and we do not show any sign of improvement in the future right now.
So what do you do?
Well, Tim Flynn is recommending buying out the contract and immediate renegotiation with the golf course. Others are saying, like Steve Nash, who published an excellent article full of suggestions on the budget last night at citizensjournal.us, says sell the damn thing. So there's different opinions. It wouldn't be that easy to sell it because it's A, on a toxic waste dump, right, and B, it's the center of a residential community where people bought in based on the fact that it was a golf course community. So this would not be simple. Ideas?
Yeah. Actually, that's a good one. And this is why I mentioned a minute ago. It appears to me that the council really doesn't know where to go or what to do with this. They want to keep it, but they can't afford to keep it. How much? Now, it's been brought up repeatedly before, and I honestly agree, and I mentioned that last night. I drive by there and I see that, parking lot full on the weekends, during the week. I find it difficult to believe that golf course is not making any money.
We only play half the rounds of golf in Oxnard than the Ventura course does. So why are they so much more successful?
That's a question that I mentioned last night. I would like to see a really in-depth forensic audit to find out exactly how much revenue is being generated, how many people golf on a daily basis, weekly basis, to find out exactly where we're at.
I think that's a subject of a whole other discussion by itself, right? One more thing I want to cover. We talk about making cuts in staff, but it was pointed out that right now 263 of the authorized 1,268 positions in the city are vacant. So they've already made some cuts. The question is, how many more cuts can be made? And we have various suggestions talking about doing basically a zero-based budgeting approach for positions. In fact, I have volunteered to conduct a process re-engineering seminar for the city, and that was accepted by City Council, City Manager Nijhoff last week. So sometime in the next month, I'll be starting on that little project, which I'm doing pro bono, by the way. Go ahead, Al.
Dr. Drummond, let me take 1 minute and just a couple of things real quickly. Measure O money. They're talking about borrowing $16 million of Measure O money.
A Measure O and waterfront money.
I'm going to stay with Measure O money. Well, first of all, that money was never intended to be used as a loan and transferred to general fund. That money, I voted against it because it was never specifically earmarked. Now, that Measure O money was specifically approved and designed to be to enhance services, never to be used as a loan. That's number one. Now, it was also mentioned by Mr. Carrillo, I believe, that one of our assets, what kind of assets does the city have? My understanding, we don't have any assets. Even our streets, there's an article that I kept here in 2007, 2008, where the city has hocked all their streets within the city. I don't know if they paid off the debt or not, but so that's something that definitely needs to be clarified as to what kind of assets do we have. Real quickly, another one is, I mentioned that last night, the treasurer report, our city's portfolio. The city has, the last number, 98 million or $100 million in the city's treasurer portfolio. I believe it's more than that, but we'll get to that later. So my point is this, I mentioned this before, there's an ordinance in the city that's still active that says that the city treasurer cannot sit on that money when there's dire need of money that is needed to keep the daily operation for the city. You have to liquidate some of those bonds and some of those investments and transfer back into the city for the city to continue operating on a daily basis. I asked that question twice already, I haven't got an answer. So again, if there is any bonds, short-term bonds that are liquidable, I think they should be liquidated and transfer that money into the general fund to carry us through. You can't sit on that money while we're starving. So
we could easily probably have another session, which I think we should do, by the way, on this. Let's look at what the upcoming steps are coming for the budget. The city departments will be having 2 days of intensive budget planning sessions right after Memorial Day, and there will be 2 public hearings during the month of June. It is their intention to have an approved budget by the end of June. It looks pretty tough right now, but we'll be giving you regular reports on what's going on. We're probably going to have Al back, and we've also asked some other people, including city employees and some very knowledgeable citizens, such as Jim Lavery, who's a former controller down in the South Bay Area, to comment. In fact, his comments are in our article, which is in Citizens Journal, called Budget Crisis, Special Oxnard City Council Emergency Meeting Monday. And last night, Steve Nash also published an article with his specific suggestions for the budget. So that kind of wraps up our session today. I want to thank Al very much for coming on, a man with some common sense and experience. And we're signing off, citizensjournal.us and KADY TV.